But certainly I had been shaped by those culture wars of the 1980s and 1990s that began to create different priorities than we see in Jesus and the gospel. I mean, even something like abortion that Jesus doesn't even mention, that's really not even directly confronted in scripture at all, yet has become one of the only things many Christians can even think about. So that, and then when it comes to other things that I think are a lot clearer, like welcoming immigrants and refugees, caring for the widows and the orphans, the strangers. I mean, this is one of the most consistent threads in Scripture. So those were, my priorities were out of whack. They were shaped a lot more by my culture than by Jesus. And, things like championing prayer in schools, those all became a part of this kind of what is it? It really is now manifests itself in the form of Christian nationalism, right? That we're going to take America back for God. We're going to put the 10 Commandments on the, public school walls and ban books and make America Christian again or something. But yeah, I think it's that part of why I have some compassion and empathy though, Elizabeth, is I was deeply immersed in that and I understand it. On many of the issues I feel really passionate about, like the death penalty, I know the arguments on the other side because I used them. I was very much convinced that Scripture justified capital punishment. I'm very comfortable with God and guns. I grew up with guns, and as you mentioned, my dad was in the military. So these things kind of got conflated together in this big God, guns, and country nationalism that I then began to deconstruct, quite some years later.
Yeah. So what happened? How did you end up on this radically different trajectory?
I mean, to be really honest, I had a very authentic encounter with Jesus. I mean, thankfully, I'm not. I don't have a story of abuse in the church. I was not. I don't feel like I experienced the worst of Christian theology. There were a lot of bones I had to spit out, but people cared about me in the church and they showed me God's love, even with blind spots and holes in the gospel that I heard preached. I fell in love with Jesus. And really what happened was that began to be my interpretive lens, right? I began to question some of the priorities of evangelicals and even the people that led me to Jesus, that we also know incidentally have now led us to Donald Trump. This became problematic and I began to really deconstruct it, but I kept going back to Jesus. And I think there's some other things that changed too. I really grew tired of the theological constructs and I guess just the version of Christianity that's just about escaping this world, right? It's about it's our faith is a ticket into heaven and a way out of the brokenness of this world. And that can have really terrible implications, obviously. So to do better theology for me was to say God cares about life before death as well as life after death. We can't promise people heaven and then ignore the hells that they're living through right now. Like when I look at Jesus saying, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It's about not just going up when we die, but bringing God's dream on earth as it is in heaven.